You know, the problem for the Prime Minister fundamentally is that this is an iceberg rebellion. We're seeing the tip of it above water with 24 members of parliament willing to walk to the microphone, look him in the eye, give their reasons that he should leave, not with anger, as you say, even with reluctance and respect, but nevertheless conclude that he can't lead the party in the next election. And below the waterline lurk so many more. Whether the Prime Minister wishes to acknowledge it to the public, to his advisors, to himself, he knows that to be true.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all having a great weekend. For today's video, we're going to be breaking down some interviews that Vashi held earlier today on her show Question Period. Now there was 3 main interviews that I want to break down, but we might only do 2 out of the 3, with the third one being the RCMP commissioner. However, if you do want to see a breakdown of that, I would suggest you go watch Clinton Jaw's video that he put out earlier today. Great breakdown. He kind of gives some behind the scenes, some stuff that we might not be privy to or really understand. I've seen his comments. Not a lot of people are a fan of what he had to say, but it is good to see the other side of the story. So I'll leave his video linked down below. And if you can, hit the subscribe button for him, because he's getting really close to 50,000. So it'd be awesome to see another creator getting up there. But in regards to today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Liberal MP Wayne Long, who was questioned on Vashi's show, as well as a panel breaking down kind of the future of Trudeau. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Joining me is one of those Liberal MPs you just heard from, Wayne Long. Hi, Mr. Long. Good to see you. Thank you so much for making the time today.
Thanks for the opportunity, Vashi. I've watched you for years. This is an honor.
Oh, you're very kind.
And please call me Wayne.
Okay, will do. When you hear from the Prime Minister that essentially he is done reflecting, he's decided to stay on as leader, what does it say that the reflection period is already over to you?
Look, I was shocked. I think we had hoped that there would be serious reflection. I mean, reflection in 18 hours tells me the Prime Minister, with respect, already had his mind made up. I mean, let's go back. The caucus meeting was clearly intense, direct, blunt. 24 MPs, I know, it's funny, caucus confidentiality. I didn't walk 30 feet outside caucus and heard there were 24 names on the list.
Right off the bat, I do want to apologize for the audio quality of this interview and the panel that you'll see later. This was all on CTV side, nothing I could do about it. But I find it hilarious that Wayne Long is talking about this caucus confidentiality, because if you remember a few videos back with Ken McDonald and David Cochrane's interview, Ken McDonald said the same thing, and David actually said, well, in theory.
It's all kind of hush-hush until it actually happens, so right. We'll see what happens tomorrow. And the thing about it is, of course, what happens in caucus stays in caucus. I'd be very surprised if anybody comes out of that meeting and talks to reporters or anything about what was said or what was done.
Well, what happens in caucus stays in caucus in theory, Ken McDonald,
yes.
Because as you know, a lot has gotten out.
Now, this is something that we know to be true, because even during CBC's live broadcast, while they were waiting for the caucus caucus meeting to be over, they were reporting about all these messages they were getting from Liberal MPs, running off to the bathroom, texting, what they knew, what was going on. So this caucus confidentiality thing seems to not be as strong as they were hoping for. But as Wayne Long mentioned, 24 names, he actually kind of adjusts that later on in the interview, saying that it potentially is more.
You have to recognize that, I'm an older person. I'm a 3-term MP. I've got some seasoning, some battle scars. For me to stand direct against the Prime Minister at caucus and say that you need to step down is one thing. But give some credit to the other people that did stand up, 24 on the list, but, young MPs, new MPs, wide array of MPs that stood up. That took a lot of courage to actually stand in front of a G7 world leader, if you will, and say, hey, we love you, and we do, but you got to step down because, we need to do what's right for the party. So, I know everybody's heard, of course, about the October 28th deadline, and he needed to resign by the 28th. And, you know, the intent was kind of like, look, let's frankly tell the Prime Minister how we feel. 24 in the letter. Clearly, there's more than that. I mean, I would say there's double that, but everybody's in a different place. Everybody's in a different space. Everybody wants to be a little protective. You never know. You know, you might get in cabinet, or you might get a powerful secretary role or something like that. But, you know, in the end, we presented a challenge, and we expected to have some second thought by the Prime Minister. And the hope was that he would take the weekend, reflect, and most importantly, Vasi, like seriously, get away from your inner circle. Like, I don't want to name names, but get away from people, because obviously prime ministers are, you know, obviously somewhat insulated. I get that, I respect that. But get away from that inner circle.
Now, it's interesting that he says he doesn't want to name names, but acknowledges that Trudeau should have separated from his inner circle, which my guess is most likely Mark Holland, Mark Miller, David LeBlanc, maybe Karina Gould, maybe Freeland. All these cabinet ministers that are essentially his yes men, they have this blind loyalty to him and have been speaking out against, no, everybody in caucus supports Trudeau. We're all behind him. It's just a few of these people, and it's okay. We're a big family. We have disagreements here and there. But as Vashi continues, she acknowledges with Wayne Long that from what she's heard, people weren't like attacking him or being rude about it. They were just trying to express their concerns about the party as a whole, because it's bigger than one person, unlike Trudeau thinks it is.
I wanted to ask you something. You touched on sort of your colleagues who also, voiced their ask. And it's interesting because I had heard also from people, like, there was no malice. It was not mean-spirited. It was very, polite in all of the instances. But it was backed up in a genuine feeling that the Prime Minister is not going to lead your party to a win in the next election. Is that your sense as well? Like, that's where it was coming from?
Yeah, I mean, look, nobody's, wringing their hands with glee here. Like, nobody's happy to do it. Everyone was very serious about it. But, like, we care. I'll be transparent. I get some calls in the riding from Liberals that are like, how dare you? How dare you do that to the party and the Prime Minister? I'm like, whoa, time out. Like, the Liberal Party is an institution in this country, obviously. It's bigger than one person. It's bigger than Justin Trudeau.
Because they're essentially your foot soldiers. They're the ones that are on the ground talking to their constituents, getting to hear what the public wants. You work for the people. If the people are unhappy with things, then you need to readjust. And when you have this many MPs coming out against you because either they see what's lurking in the waters or their constituents are openly expressing to them that they need you to get rid of Trudeau, and the fact that you take less than 24 hours to come to this decision clearly shows that you are not a good leader and all you think about is yourself. And if Wayne Long wasn't such a hardcore liberal, I think he'd be a pretty good conservative. He seems very commonsensical, seems like he's got a good head on his shoulders. The next section here, he says some kind of outlandish things, but we'll get into that in a second.
And as elected members, we have a duty. We have an obligation to make sure that we put the best foot forward in the upcoming election. And like a lot of my colleagues feel the same. It's like we're really concerned as to where we're going. Like, show me a poll that says 80% of Canadians think the Prime Minister shouldn't step down.
The Prime Minister's supporters also contend that things will be different when the campaign starts, and that essentially, and this has certainly been conveyed through media reports, that the Prime Minister and the people around him believe he is the best person to be able to defeat Poilievre when that campaign, does start in earnest. Is it possible they're right?
Well, you know what? I looked at some. I was scrolling last night on the internet, looking at different things, and I saw this thing. The party's 20 points down. 3 polls. It was like 40-22, 41-19, 40-23. And then I saw, elections are a chance to reboot. We will frame our opponent. Our opponent's message is simplistic. He's just talking about making affordability for Canadians. And guess what, Vasi? That was from 2018, 1 month before Kathleen Wynne's obliteration. Like, history repeats itself. Sorry, but it does. So, like, let's pull the drape open here. And let's not be afraid as elected members to say, look, Justin Trudeau has done amazing things for this country. History is going to be very kind to Justin Trudeau.
And that's where Wayne lost me, because history will not be good to Trudeau. Nobody is going to remember this guy in a positive light. But something that he did mention in regards to history repeating itself. We constantly hear in the House of Commons them talking about Trudeau's record right now over the past 9 years. Funny enough, Trudeau actually said this about Harper back in 2015 during their election cycle. And to see him say that back then and now it being said about him says a lot. But if you don't know what I'm talking about, here's that clip.
Thank you, David. It's great to be here in Calgary tonight. I want to start with a few questions, my friends. Are you better off now than you were 10 years ago when Stephen Harper became Prime Minister? Is our country better off? Do you have better job prospects? Do you have confidence that your kids have a brighter future? I've spent a long time talking with thousands of Canadians across this country. And Mr. Harper may not see what's going on from 24 Sussex Drive, but I do. I know that Canadians are worried about their jobs, and that's what this election is about. Their jobs and the jobs that their kids are going to have.
So let's take a look at that. That's what he said about Harper's government and what it was like under Harper in 2015. Now 2024, everyone can agree it is way worse. And that's why a lot of Canadians are saying they'd much rather be under a Harper government currently. And as we're going to go back to a common sense conservative government, I think a lot of people will probably be a lot better off than what Trudeau promised and failed. And this is something actually Wayne talked about, how they were promised to get this reboot many, many times and nothing ever happened. Because these guys were just banking on the Conservatives messing up big enough that the Canadians would not see through the Liberals' failures.
We are at a point right now where I'm convinced that we think that Pierre Poilievre is just going to define himself and, let's just hold tight. I've said it many times, stay calm and carry on. It's like, look, in 2022, we had caucus in St. Andrews, very close to my beautiful riding in St. John Ross. And we were told, buckle up, put your seatbelt on. It's going to be a rough year, but man, 2023, we're turning the corner. It's good. Okay. 2023, we go to London. Some of us, without divulging confidentiality, of course, got up and said, hey, this isn't very good. I think we need some changes. We got it. Don't worry. We've got it covered. We're coming out with stuff. Okay. 2024, Nanaimo. It's like people are oblivious to what's going on around us. And I'm like, no.
I just got 30 seconds left, Lane, and I wanted to know, I guess the question lots of Canadians will have after listening to this and seeing the events of the week will be, what now? Obviously, you're not running again, and some of the others who have spoken out aren't. But not everyone has made that call who voiced their opinion to the Prime Minister. If you were to hazard a guess as to whether they don't run again, whether there are other possibilities that exist, like what could you convey to Canadians watching now about what might happen there?
Well, I know there's been people like, they're disorganized and there's this and that. Like, I think every one of us, we're still talking. We're kind of coming up with what do we do next. Obviously, I still hope the Prime Minister will take what I'm saying and take what others are saying and reflect. This isn't quite like the end of it for me. I'm going to continue to say, no, this isn't This isn't good enough. Are some MPs who are in different spaces probably going to, pardon the pun, but wane off a little bit? Yeah. But you know what? We're going to keep pushing and we're going to keep looking. I think a secret ballot is something that would be wanted. I think that would solve it once and for all. And one last point, Vassie, there is time. I know people are saying, oh, there's no time. There is time. We can do this. Democracy is messy, and we're determined to make sure that the Liberal Party can succeed in the future.
You know, it's a real shame that Wayne is so hopeful because he seems like a really nice guy, but there's no chance that the Liberals have. There's no amount of time that could give them to somehow come back from this 20-point deficit, their track record, anything like that. And at this point, Trudeau would never agree to a secret ballot because he knows he would be ousted for sure. And this guy is all about control. And this moves into the next panel that Vashi had on her show, where she had a conservative, a liberal, and NDP member on. You've seen him before. And as you saw from the opener, the liberal actually had a really good point. So without further ado, let's get into that.
Will he stay or will he go? Prime Minister Justin Trudeau this week seemingly survived the most significant test to his leadership yet, with dozens of MPs organizing to ask him to step down at this week's caucus. Trudeau came out of that meeting insisting his party is strong and united, and a day later insisted he's staying on as leader. But the calls for him to step down have not been quashed. Some disaffected MPs are giving him until tomorrow to reflect, and if he doesn't call it quits, they're threatening unspecified consequences. Trudeau, meanwhile, took another hit this week when he walked back a major Liberal policy announcing significant cuts to Canada's permanent immigration targets.
Because in the tumultuous times as we emerged from the pandemic, between addressing labour needs and maintaining population growth, we didn't get the balance quite right.
Also still looming large is the Bloc Québécois ultimatum and its Tuesday deadline that the Bloc start negotiating with other opposition parties to topple the Liberal government if the government doesn't ensure two Bloc-led bills become law. So can Trudeau maintain his fragile hold on power, and where do the Liberals go from here? Scott, I'll start with you. I've spent the last number of days talking to people who are inside that room, and I think it's fair to say that the ask of the Prime Minister was not just a few people. It was at least a couple dozen MPs who, without malice or I've heard, without anger, just said, please, would you consider this, because we really do think we're going to lose with you at the helm of the party. Does it surprise you that Prime Minister 18 hours came out and said, well, I'm done reflecting, I'm staying?
It probably doesn't surprise me, but I know it angered a lot of people. I know it angered a lot of people in that room, and I've talked to folks just as you have who told me precisely the same thing. And, I think if the Prime Minister's objective over the last 48 hours is to demonstrate closure on this issue and to say, all right, we've given them their chance, we listened, we were respectful, and now it's time to move forward, I don't think that objective has been realized. There's no whistling past this graveyard. There's going to be more to come. That's pretty clear. And, the problem for the Prime Minister fundamentally is that this is an iceberg rebellion. We're seeing the tip of it above water with 24 members of Parliament willing to walk to the microphone, look him in the eye, give their reasons that he should leave, not with anger, as you say, even with reluctance and respect, but nevertheless conclude that he can't lead the party in the next election. And below the waterline lurk so many more. Whether the Prime Minister wishes to acknowledge it to the public, to his advisors, to himself, he knows that to be true, and that is a heavy weight to drag around. This issue is not closed, it's not going away, and it really does weigh the party and the Prime Minister down badly.
Corey, you've been close to people who have led as premiers, as prime ministers. If something like this unfolded before them, what do you anticipate happens next? Do you think it is plausible that the Prime Minister continues to insist, we're strong, we're united, and we just go forward?
I don't think it's viable for him to stay over the long term or even the medium term. But he's demonstrated a level of self-delusion that I've never seen before in politics, to be honest. To come out of that caucus meeting, as you described it, and have the top line that you give the media to be that we're strong and united while you're 20 points back and a third of your, 20% of your caucus is an open rebellion. And, as Scott mentioned, it's like an iceberg. We all know that it's way, way, way more people than those who stood up at the mic or signed that letter. It's virtually everyone. in liberal voter land that actually wants to see him gone. I just don't see how you can stay if that's the case. It's not viable.
You know, I always do enjoy watching Corey and Scott on these panels. Kathleen is another thing, and the comment section also reflects that not a lot of people like that Kathleen is ever on these panels. But yeah, Scott and Corey, everything that they said, I agree with completely. And it kind of leans into what Wayne has said where, yeah, 24 members have signed it, but this so-called iceberg, there's definitely like 40, 50, maybe even 60 individuals who are unhappy with Trudeau and want him out of here. Now, to Corey's point, Trudeau is absolutely delusional, and you can't tell this guy anything because it's his job. He's going to keep it the way he wants. And that's something Scott brings up after we hear from Kathleen.
What do you think about that, Kathleen? I will point out there were more MPs that asked him to leave, but there were, I'm told, like somewhere around 15 who also expressed support for him.
For support, for sure. I think there's a truism in politics, and that is that speed kills. And the problem is when you use speed in politics, it can help quash kind of negative attacks. It can help shape the media narrative. It can help define your opponent. And the problem with this kind of mutiny that's been happening with the Liberals, it's been slow motion. Like, it's been slow motion. It's been going on for over a year. And the speed
Sounds like the worst breakup I've ever had. Just watching it. I said that to someone the other day, like, oh my God, when's this thing going to end?
Exactly. And the speed problem's on both sides, to be clear, right? Like, the caucus hasn't moved with any force. There's no clear ultimatum. It just seems like they're going to be sleepwalking into political oblivion, right? And the speed problem is also on that of the Prime Minister. He could have gotten ahead of this 6 months ago. It's stuff we've been saying on this show and in other places for well over 6 months, that they could come with an action plan and do something. But right now, what is possible for the Liberals? If they go into a Liberal leadership right now, I want to present a couple risks. Like, first of all, they risk a lot of infighting. There's going to be a fight between corporate Liberals and more socially progressive Liberals. There's also a massive risk, frankly, that there's just no clear alternative. And that is what they face. And that's why I think they've kind of gotten into this sleepwalking area, that they don't know what to do. The caucus coup hasn't been strong enough, and Trudeau hasn't presented a plan, so they are literally just sleepwalking. They're dead party walking, so to speak.
Scott, I'll get you to respond to that. And it is interesting that, you know, what we discussed last week, and in particular there was a lot of reaction from our audience, the idea that, like, you know, they would come to caucus with this advance notice prepared to say, here's what we are going to do to counter the sentiment that you're getting at the doors. Like, here's our action plan into the next election. That didn't happen. The one thing that everyone was able to coalesce around was, we want to beat Pierre Poilievre, and the Conservatives, and the way in which they tried to underscore that this week was to talk about the fact that Poilievre refuses to get his security clearance in order to see, like, classified information about foreign interference. Is that pivot working in your view, and is it a strategy that can work over the long term?
I think it's working unto itself. It's the first and best clock on the jaw that the Prime Minister's had on Poilievre in quite some time, and he's clearly on the defensive about it. And now with the Bloc leader getting his security clearance, it's only going to intensify the questions. But over the medium term, it doesn't fix any of the fundamental challenges that the Prime Minister face. I'll just respond to Kathleen. I mean, she's right. But in some ways, what's most problematic about all of this for the Prime Minister is that it isn't actually this dissent isn't galvanized around an ambitious alternative. It is genuinely a sincere statement of frustration and anxiety about the consequences of remaining with the Prime Minister. It's solely a judgment on him, and he's not fighting for his job, as you point out, Vashi. If you think about it, he's not fighting. He's simply saying, I don't even need to fight. It's my job and you can't take it. Go fly a kite. And so he's not offering an alternative plan. He's not offering any change. And when you talk to members of the parliament, they will say to you, as they said to his face in caucus, you promised us a plan and you promised us a road back. You promised that at National Caucus in London. You promised that after the June by-election loss. It still hasn't come. And the Prime Minister, to be blunt, is not offering it now. That is quite telling.
Now, the one thing I will agree with Kathleen on is that the Liberals are sleepwalking, clearly. You could see from the polls, from the numbers, from now the dissent of the caucus and them revolting. This should be a wake-up call for you guys to be like, maybe Trudeau isn't the guy we need. Maybe the constituents who are expressing that they don't like him and they don't like him as the Liberal Party leader means we should take another look at this. But to Scott's credit, as they moved into the question about Pierre, the foreign interference, and the security clearance, Scott makes the point that it doesn't matter really about that, because Trudeau will say, well, it's my job and I'll do what I want. Like, they have no way of ousting him currently, I'm pretty sure, unlike the other parties where they could put a vote. And that's why Wayne Long was talking about the secret ballot. If they decided to have something like that, then they could actually vote him out, and nobody would be worried about like who has a target on their back and whatnot, because it would be anonymous. Everybody just signs their names on these ballots, submits it, majority rules. But again, Trudeau would never allow that, which is what Scott is getting at. However, when they move into Corey and then back to Kathleen, this is where she just goes kooky. I don't think she really understands what she's saying.
I'm sort of convinced, Corey, that the plan is to keep presenting the types of policies that they have, which they, my sense is they truly believe resonate with Canadians, and to go on the attack more on Poilievre in a way that will pay off for them during the campaign. And I think that they do feel, and I've certainly heard from a lot of Canadians that they agree that the punch around not getting security clearance is landing for them, and that there's more of that to come. But I don't think they feel like they need some brand new policy landscape to put forward beyond what they've already done.
Well, I guess I question who they is, right? Like, I don't think the answers that they've given on this are satisfactory to certainly Canadians, if you look at the polling, or even their own caucus. Like, I think that, you know, what we've seen is them just doing more of the same things, only doing it louder, doing it again, you know, expecting somehow they're going to get a different result. It's almost Monty Python-esque. Like, at a certain point, you know, the Prime Minister's in his own little world here, where he thinks that if he just keeps repeating that he's putting a price on pollution and that everyone should be grateful for a carbon tax and that somehow it magically is putting more money in your bank account than it's taking out. All of these messages are, you know, they haven't worked. And I don't think it's due to a lack of repetition. I think it's because they're just not very compelling messages.
Kathleen wants to jump in.
I know Corey will disagree with me, but I actually think the message on foreign interference is one that will have impact. Canadians don't understand why someone who wants to be Prime Minister won't actually go and get the security clearance. It's not a choice between whether, when you become Prime Minister, frankly, you're going to have to get the security clearances and do the media. You actually have to do both. That's the nature of the job. You want the promotion, you got to get the clearance and do the work. And people understand that. They don't want you to choose your party over your country. When the country's at threat, whatever the nature of that threat is, any politician needs to be unified in their stance to defend our country and do whatever it takes to do that. And right now, Poilievre is choosing not to take the security clearance, get the information he needs to make the analysis, and no counter argument or rebuttal from his spokesperson or from him is going to fix that.
Now, Corey had just finished giving what they say the definition of insanity is, which is doing the same thing over and over and over again with expecting different results. However, Kathleen here seems to be the one who's a little unhinged. She used to work for the former NDP leader Jack Layton. After he passed, the successor to him was Tom Mulcair. And what did Tom say just a few days ago?
The main job of the leader of the opposition is to hold the government to account. I agree completely with Poilievre's decision not to take the bait. Trudeau's been trying for a year and a half to restrain what Pierre Poilievre can do by trying to say, come and get this private briefing, and oh, by the way, then you'll be held to an official secret and you won't be able to talk about this anymore.
So even the former NDP leader is saying that Pierre did the right thing. Kathleen is saying nobody could say that he's not doing the right thing. He has no excuses. I think I'll probably listen to the advice from a former political party leader rather than you, Kathleen. But on that note, that's where I'm going to end today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know in the comment section below what you thought about all this. If you could, hit the subscribe button. And don't forget to hit subscribe for Clinton Jaws. Again, as I mentioned at the start, try to get that guy to 50,000 subscribers. He's almost there. And as always, I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.